At the end of the day, the story of some bag of cocaine in the White House is just it's just meaningless. It really is meaningless, actually, because it's going to be forgotten about. It's probably already forgotten about for the most part, and that's it. I mean, there are so many things. There are so many things that we holler about and that we complain about, yammer about, whatever word you want to use, that eventually become completely meaningless. Um, I remember back in 2000 and I want to say 11 or 12, I went to this guy's house. He was also a radio host. He had his own little show, local show in the area. He invited me and my father over for dinner. We had dinner at his house, and he was showing me around his house. And he had this book, and it was a really thick book, like super thick. It was like a brick. And I asked him, "What's this book?" And he said, "Well, this book is, I forgot the name of it, but he said this book is about the crimes of the Clintons, the crimes that were done by Hillary Clinton, by Bill Clinton, and it gives you like huge amounts of detail about all these crimes that they committed and how terrible they were and how evil they were and blah 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 and how horrible they were and all this stuff." And that was over a decade ago that I had this discussion. And he was a local radio host, and he was very passionate about the subject, and he was right about the things that he was saying. Um, but at the end of the day, we're here. We are over a decade later, and it's like, who gives a shit about the Clintons? There's so many things that we complain about that in the end become meaningless. It's like that line from that song from Linkin Park. In the end, it doesn't really matter, right? Like that's what it reminds me of. It's like, yeah, it's like, what was I gonna say? It's like gay marriage. Gay marriage is terrible. It's a terrible thing. It really is horrible. Gay marriage is horrible. And over 10 years ago, it was a big issue. Back in 2009, whatever, it was a huge issue. And people were complaining about it. There were people protesting about it. Franklin Graham was over it. Franklin Graham Ministries, Miseries, they were all talking about gay marriage and how gay marriage was just a threat to civilization, a threat to our survival, a threat to our culture. It was awful. It was demonic. It was satanic. It was this. It was that. And 60% of Americans opposed gay marriage at one point in time. Well, they did a poll in 2017, and it wasn't 60% disapproval. It was amongst white evangelicals. The number was around 48% approval of gay marriage. So the country has definitely gone through a dramatic shift in this area. And, over 10 years ago, we were like, oh my God, this is the end of the world, and blah, blah, blah. This is terrible. This is awful. And it was awful. I completely disagree with it. But no one cares. Right. And so I look back in the past, and it feels like a distant memory, that holds. It's a distant memory, and I'm thinking of the times when I was hanging out with my friends and we were complaining about this stuff and talking about how awful it was and it's terrible and Obama is ruining the world and it's so awful and it's so this and it's so that. But who's talking about Obama? Who's talking about any of these things? And in 2021, they did a poll for conservatives and their opinions on gay marriage, and for the first time, conservatives had a majority approval for gay marriage, and this was in 2021. 2021. So it's like, how much has changed in not a lot of time? 10 years isn't really a huge amount of time. It feels like a long time, but it really isn't. And like I said, those days when we were just so passionate about fighting this stuff, it feels like a distant memory. And I'll listen to music from that time period, and it just triggers all these memories from that era, and it gives me these feelings of nostalgia, and it feels like a distant memory. I feel like I'm in a cave somewhere, and there's this little light that's seeping through the cracks, and those little beams of light are whatever energy is remaining from that long ago era. It's a beautiful feeling, to be honest with you. I love the feeling of nostalgia. Did you watch the movie Oppenheimer? No, I don't really plan on watching this film. It doesn't really interest me.